Hi, I'm Terry Talty. I'm with the Invisible Museum that is the sponsor of MoPrint, and we're in the second iteration of MoPrint, MoPrint 2016, and we're here today with Mark Friday at Space Gallery, and we're going to talk a little bit about Mark's work. So how did, you said you consider yourself more of a sculptor nowadays, that you're doing a lot of three-dimensional work.
Yes, I do mixed media assemblage sculptures, but I sometimes incorporated the printed element within those, so I'm still using printmaking in my sculpture.
How would you describe them?
They really vary. Sometimes I just use completely all found materials. Sometimes I integrate created materials, such as the print or a bit of a painting. So they really vary. I use a lot of old-fashioned looking imagery, science and architecture, things like that, and incorporate those in the sculptures.
Right, so and some of that is, it's elevating this kind of advertising-y, printy looking world into this current more assemblage type of sculpture. Is that somewhat what it's about?
Yeah, somewhat. My sculptures tend to be old looking, so I pick images that are appropriate for that. I'll use a lot of earth tones and that type of thing. Okay. But it varies. I do lots of different things with it.
Have you always been in the silkscreen area of printing?
Yes. Yeah. I started doing that in the 70s, actually. Actually, I got interested in it during the 60s when I was in school, and the pop art movement was in full swing. And I really liked the look, the kind of the hard edge look, blasts of color, that type of thing. People like Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein and Robert Rauschenberg, Jasper Johns, those people.
Yeah, they really elevated silkscreen printing to fine art.
And they were combining that with objects at some point, and also just using it in a variety of ways.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to school at the University of Northern Colorado initially, and I was there for about 3 years, and I got a little disillusioned with it, so I quit for a while, and then I got a job in a commercial screen printing shop. Okay. And that's actually where I learned the craft, was there. And
what were you printing there?
A lot of commercial works, bumper stickers, posters, anything.
Peter Max?
No, it was very, very commercial. We weren't doing any fine art, really.
It wasn't T-shirts?
It wasn't even T-shirts, no. It was just a lot of signage, things like that. But I didn't care. I was just interested to learn the process.
Well, your work's really textural now. It's much more like a drawn line than. I mean, you've made silkscreening much more handmade looking than kind of the way it was in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, I've experimented with it and gone past the hard edge look and tried to get a little more of a painterly feel to it.
How are you doing that? How are you achieving that?
Well, it's a photographic process, and that's created on a screen, which is basically fabric stretched on a wooden frame. And then I put the images on there with a photographic process. So I have to do intermediate artwork on a piece of film, a piece of transparent or translucent film. Okay. And do a drawing or a transfer or something on that film that's opaque. Okay. And then sensitize the screen with a light-sensitive photo emulsion, and then expose the screen with the film on top of it, and the dark or the opaque areas of the film prevents the light from striking the screen, and those areas remain soluble in water. It will wash out after the exposure, and it leaves a stencil, and that's what you print through with a squeegee onto whatever you have underneath it.
T-shirts or a piece of paper.
Yeah, or in the case of recent works, I usually print on wood, thin panels of wood, or even sheet metal and plexiglass.
And that adheres as well as it does.
Yeah, it adheres really well on the wood. It's usually primed first.
Okay.
With acrylic paint, because the ink I use is acrylic based. Okay. So it bonds pretty well to that. And the plexiglass, it doesn't really bond to it because it's a water-based ink. Yeah. But I print what's going to end up be on the inside of the piece, so it's not exposed to the outside world where somebody could scratch it or
So you're going to see through the plexiglass to
Right.
the print. Oh, that's
So it's printed
cool.
backwards, basically.
Yeah.
So,
Oh.
and then with those different materials, I can create sort of three-dimensional feels. I can manipulate the image somewhat and create sort of three-dimensional work.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And so just let me get this kind of straight, that you're not manipulating the stencil physically. You're manipulating whatever
Yes.
the kind of the negative or positive you're making. Are you doing it on like a plastic or a film?
Yes, it's actually Mylar.
Mylar,
Yes.
okay. And then that's what does the photo process. It's
Yeah, you can tell exactly what you're going to get by the nature of the film.
right.
So when you make the screen, you know what you're going to get.
It's a positive.
Yes.
Yeah, right. It's like a slide.
And sometimes I will manipulate the print after I've printed it
Okay.
by blotting it with paper or something, just to sort of change it up a little bit so not everything is exactly the same.
So before the ink dries, you'll
Right.
move it around.
Well, sometimes after, you can scrape it, sand it, do
Yeah.
things to it, reveal what's underneath. So I pick up a lot of layers that way. So,
You know, the whole process of printmaking, it just fascinates me because, it's a process where you make this image and then you can replicate it. You can do
Yes.
it again. And it's really interesting how many artists are doing it again, but doing it again in a different way.
right. Yeah.
And this is kind of the nature of printmaking today. Why do you choose a process that's like that?
Well, I like to have the fact that you can make multiples, and so I'll print a little small pile of things. and
I'll print a small pile of things.
Right.
Okay.
And then I'll use them a few now and a few later, whenever I need to. So I have them on hand for that.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So, and I use some images I'll use in different ways, and so I have.
So
some,
do you reuse the screens? And
Yes, I have dozens of screens with images already on them, and I'll reprint them every now and then when I think of a new way to use them,
yeah.
and combine them with something else I've never used it with, and it's very experimental.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's great. So we talked about how your work's getting more three-dimensional, but that it maybe you think it's kind of always had this vein of silkscreen. How's your work different now than it was imagery-wise, 10, 15, 20 years ago?
Well, that's a good question. It's just evolved, and sometimes it's not much different. I go back and do something I did 20 years ago, but in a little bit of a new way.
Yeah, I mean, some of these screens are 20 years old?
Yes, yeah. Actually, a lot of them are from old T-shirt designs I used to print, and I stopped doing that maybe 10 years ago, but I still like the images, so I'll print them on a piece of wood or a piece of metal or something and incorporate them into a sculpture.
Yeah. What's your favorite image?
It's hard to say. I don't really have a favorite one. No, I've printed hundreds of images, thousands probably, either for somebody else or for myself,
Yeah.
and I couldn't really pinpoint something.
Well, are you going to something? Is there something like one of these screens you've carried around for 20 years that you can think of that's typical of your work?
Well, a lot of it maybe deals with old scientific apparatus. I've got a bunch of those. And I enjoy printing those and combining those with actual objects that relate to it.
Okay.
I can't think of anything else other than that right now. Top of
No,
my
no,
head,
that's
but-
good. That's good. That gives me more of a, how you're seeing these things. Because in a lot of ways, the work, it's a little, it seems somewhat random, but you're saying, it really is tied together because of the imagery. Like you said, it might be old scientific equipment with something that relates to that.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a more, you're going to give us clues as to what these pieces are about.
Hopefully.
I mean, that's one of the ways you're
Yeah.
giving us clues.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Well, sometimes they're not about anything. They're just a bunch of random images and objects that I've thrown together. And for some reason, they seem to have a reason to be together.
It's for their interesting juxtaposition.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
So, yeah, how do you tend to work in layers? When
yes. Yeah. when I do paint, I sort of paint like a printmaker. I'll put down one color, and then after that dries, I use acrylic paint, and I can put another color over the top of that, and build up several layers, and then often I will scrape the top layer or two off, reveal layers underneath, because I enjoy that distressed look. And when I'm searching for found materials, I'm always looking for stuff that has some pigment on it and some that has worn away, and so I kind of like mixing those together, things that I've created that way, so that it looks like things that I've found, and things that I found that look like things that I make.
Oh,
I don't know if
okay,
that
makes sense. Yeah, yeah. And so it's this kind of what you're saying. The printmaker is kind of this this layer, this organized kind of building up process. It's not that you're just not that spontaneous painter. Oh, I'm just gonna.
Right. Yeah. Any painting I do usually is in conjunction with something else, a print or a sculpture. I haven't done just a painting for doing a painting's sake in many years.
Okay.
But I use it a lot with my work to kind of bridge the gap between maybe sculpture and printmaking.
Do you start with a kind of a concept idea and and then you're going to build several pieces around that?
Yes, often do. But sometimes I just start fresh and I just go through piles of stuff I have sitting around the studio and just pick out things that seem to belong together.
What are you working on right now?
I'm working on some mixed media pieces using found materials and little collage techniques.
Found materials like what?
Musical instruments.
Oh.
Yeah, I have somebody gave me, I can't remember who, gave me a whole box of piano keys, and I've used them in several pieces.
Oh, okay.
Right now I've incorporated it with part of a trombone and another horn instrument, or horn piece, and creating a three-dimensional piece from that, and some sheet music as well that I'm collaging on the background area. So.
Are you having, the effect of the ink on, you said you've been printing on different materials, so there's some distress with that too?
Yeah, I mean, I can actually be a little more heavy-handed if the print is on a piece of wood panel, because I can, be kind of rough with it, and I can sand it or scrape it or whatever, whereas paper might tear.
Yeah, okay.
So I can print on something more durable.
But is it sticking all right to the metal?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh,
I mean, if it's, I have to sand the metal first, and then put a coating of like, say, primer or acrylic paint down first.
Okay.
Somewhat bonds to it. It doesn't stick as well to the metal as it does the wood.
Yeah.
But that's okay. I kind of wanted some of it to come off anyway.
Yeah, so some of it comes off.
And then when I get it to where I want it, I will put a coat of varnish, water-based varnish over it, which kind of stops any further deterioration and kind of preserves it as it is.
Well, and then it's done.
Yes, usually, yes.
So how much of your own work do you still have around?
I have quite a bit. I try to sell it, but I'm still the biggest collector of my own work.
It's good to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you see in the books, you see collection of the artists,
Yeah, yeah.
and you go, oh, really? Like he's really consciously collecting his own work, but it's really, he just hasn't been able to sell it yet. So.
Right, I know. I know.